As you guys probably already know, this is an ongoing series where we go back and grade draft classes, and in today's video, we will be grading picks 32 through 17 in reverse order from the 2017 NFL Draft. Picks 1 through 16 will be out next week, and looking back, this was a very good draft class, and we will be starting today's video with Saints offensive tackle Ryan Ramcheck, and finishing with Commanders defensive lineman Jonathan Allen. Some of these guys are still making an impact, while others are out of the league, and without further ado, let's begin. The Saints traded up to get tackle Ryan Ramcheck with the final pick in the first round, and with the talented players they've had over the years like Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, and everyone else, Ramcheck often gets lost in the mix, and unlike a lot of other players, he's never had a bad year. Sure, he has a bad game once or twice a season, but he is a franchise tackle and has 3 All-Pros to his name, with a first-team All-Pro coming back in 2019. Ryan has allowed just 7 sacks in his last 1,566 pass-blocking snaps, or since the start of the 2020 regular season, and from Week 7 on in the 2022 regular season, he did not allow a sack. The last pick in the first round has substantially different expectations than the number 1 overall pick, and drafting a 3-time All-Pro with the very last pick in the first round in what was a legendary draft class for the Saints is an A+ draft grade. Linebacker Reuben Foster was a very controversial prospect, as he was once viewed as a top 10 player in the class, but a lot of teams took him off their draft board because of everything that happened in the pre-draft process. He was kicked out of the combine, then failed a drug test which turned out to be diluted, but is still treated the same. The red flags were there, and in July of 2018, he was suspended for 2 games for violating the league's personal conduct policy, which stemmed from a weapons offense and a misdemeanor drug offense. He was released by the 49ers in November of 2018, and I think Foster is one of the bigger what-ifs from the past few years, but this was a tremendously bad first round for the 49ers, as they also selected Solomon Thomas number 3 overall, and you can probably guess what's coming, but 6 years later this grade is an F. He was then known as JJ's little brother and is now known as a 5-time Pro Bowler and a 3-time first-team All-Pro player, and it's Steelers pass rusher TJ Watt. Oh, and he also won the 2021 Defensive Player of the Year award. In 6 seasons, he has 77.5 sacks, and in a 4-year span from 2018 through the end of the 2021 season, Watt accumulated 65 sacks in 4 years. He is a nightmare to game plan against, and he's not just a guy that gets sacks either, and is not a one-trick pony. He's one of the best defensive players in football, and in 2019, in what was a forgetful year for the Steelers, Watt forced a league-leading 8 fumbles. Him and teammate Alex Highsmith are a devastating duo when rushing the passer, and I don't think there's going to be, at least I hope there are no disputes with this draft grade, as it's an easy A+. The Browns had 3 first-round picks on this night, and with their 3rd first-round pick, they selected tight end David Njoku from Miami. Njoku signed a 4-year, $56 million contract last May, which I thought was an insane overpay by the Browns, but in 6 years, Njoku has amassed just under 2,400 yards receiving, along with 19 receiving touchdowns. I absolutely loved this pick when it was made, but the production from David has been underwhelming, especially from a first-round tight end. And that may be a theme in today's video as we get a little further into grading these picks. Cleveland drafted a player that will play for them for 8 or 9 years, but he's never been a great tight end by any means, and one that does not validate the 29th overall pick. I wouldn't mind David on my team's roster, but this draft pick did not pan out. A C+ grade. Taco Charlton was the Cowboys' first-round pick back in 2017, and this is one Cowboys fans are probably wincing at 6 years later. If there's anybody watching that got into football over the past few years, there's a chance you don't know who Taco is. And to summarize this draft pickup, his tenure with Dallas was over early in his 3rd season. He was released in September of 2019, as in not traded for a 7th round pick, to give Dallas anything in return for him. He played in just 27 games for the Cowboys before being released and started just 7 games. Whether it be on the practice squad or the actual roster, Taco has been a part of 7 different organizations in 6 years, and this is an F grade. Corner TreDavious White was the Bills' first-round pick, and this pick was acquired from Kansas City after they traded up to get a quarterback you may have heard of by the name of Patrick Mahomes. And 6 years later, TreDavious has multiple Pro Bowls to his name, multiple All-Pros to his name, including a first team back in 2019. In what was also the same year, he tied with a few other players in leading the league in interceptions. And unfortunately for White, the last 2 years have been very frustrating for him, as he tore his ACL, causing him to play in just 17 games over those 2 years. I think White is a very good player when healthy, and I hope 2023 gets him back to full health, because it would help the Bills tremendously as they try and win a Super Bowl in the loaded AFC. An A grade. Takkarist McKinley had a fiery post-draft interview after being selected by the Atlanta Falcons and was released in November of 2020 after requesting a trade from the team several times. Tak wasn't a bad player with Atlanta, as he had 17.5 sacks in 49 games with the team, but certainly was not a superstar either, and if he was, he would still be there and Atlanta would not still be looking to shore up their pass rush. Having 13 sacks in the first 2 years of a career is solid production, but those 13 sacks are 65% of his career total, as he only has 20 career sacks and 7 in the last 4 years. He started 25 games for Atlanta and was an average player at best. Factoring in he was released, this draft grade is a C-. Jabrill Peppers was the Browns' second first-round pick of the night, and this isn't easy to grade because he was a part of the Odell Beckham trade that sent him from the Giants to the Browns. Peppers has been a solid player at the NFL level, and during his time in Cleveland, he started 29 of 32 possible games, had 3.5 sacks, and had a pair of interceptions as well. I would love for Browns fans to weigh in on this draft grade because Jabrill was traded at just 23 years old, and I think he was going to start for this team for several years and be a quality starter at that. So in a world where he never gets traded, I think this would be a B or B+ grade. Conley was selected by the then Oakland Raiders and is now out of the league. During the 2019 season, he was traded to the Texans for a 3rd-round pick and played the rest of the season with Houston, then was placed on injured reserve before the start of the 2020 season, and that was it for Conley. The Raiders had a string of bad first-round picks, and Conley certainly wasn't the worst of them by any means, as when he was on the field, he wasn't a game-changing player by any definition, but he wasn't terrible either. And they did get a 3rd-round pick, granted it was from Bill O'Brien, but a 3rd-round pick nonetheless. I have a hard time absolutely killing this pick, and 6 years later, we give it a D+. Ingram was the second tight end drafted, and in 5 years with the Giants, he racked up over 250 receptions and over 2,800 receiving yards, along with 16 receiving touchdowns. When this pick was made, Ingram was supposed to stretch the defense vertically in a big way, and him and then Giants receiver Odell Beckham were going to be a great receiver and tight end duo. Unfortunately, it never quite worked out the way the Giants intended, as the best season Evan had was 64 receptions for 722 yards and 6 touchdowns. Ingram had a resurgence year in Jacksonville in 2022, but for the Giants specifically, there's been worse first-round picks and there's certainly been better, and 6 years later we give this a C. Charles Harris out of Missouri was the Dolphins' first-round pick and has hung around the NFL for several years. And by hung around, I mean he's been a rotational rusher, which is not something you want from a first-round pick. Those players are great to have, but certainly not what you envision when you are on the clock at number 22 overall. Charles played 41 games as a member of the Dolphins before being traded in May of 2020 to the Falcons for just a 7th-round pick. The Falcons declined his 5th-year option and gave up a 7th-round pick to take a swing on a former first-rounder, and it did not work out for them either. Charles had 7.5 of his 15 career sacks in 2021 with the Lions, but this grade is for the Dolphins selection, and when your first-round pick starts just 8 games for you, this is an F. Jarrett Davis, the linebacker from Florida, went number 21 to the Lions, and a story of his career has been missed tackles. During his first two seasons back in 2017 and 18, he racked up 196 total tackles, which, yes, is solid for a linebacker, but also missed 36 tackles during this time period. He certainly has flashes, like most linebackers do, but he is not good in coverage, and lifetime per PFF has given up 8 touchdowns and, when targeted, has surrendered a passer rating of 114.9. He played for the Lions for 4 years before signing with the Jets in 2021, then eventually signing back with the Lions in 2022 before getting released and signed with the Giants to finish out the 2022 season. This pick was below average, and the Davis selection gets a C-. Garrett Bowles was a 25-year-old rookie, so hitting on this pick was crucial for the Denver Broncos, and 6 years later, they did. Bowles was a second-team All-Pro in 2020 as he allowed 13 pressures all year to 0 sacks. And unfortunately, he did break his leg early in 2022, which prematurely ended his season, but in the first 6 years of his career, Bowles has played and started 82 games for Denver. And to be clear, Garrett definitely had some growing pains early on, but Denver will end up getting an 8 or 9 year starter at left tackle, and we give this an A- grade. Everyone, and I mean everyone, thought the Bucs got the steal of the draft in tight end O.J. Howard, myself was included in everyone by the way, and thought him and Jameis Winston were going to be a great duo, and that along with Mike Evans, these three would be a great trio. O.J. ended up playing 5 years in Tampa, and despite all of the pre-draft hype, he finished his Bucs career with 1,700 receiving yards and 15 receiving touchdowns. He obviously wasn't great, but the thing to remember with draft grades is you have to be awful to receive an F grade, and Howard had 3 seasons with 400 or more yards, which again isn't great, but we give this draft grade a D rather than an F. Adarius Jackson, the corner from USC, played 4 years in Tennessee before being cut in March of 2021, then signed a 3-year, $39 million deal with the New York Giants. And Jackson's time in Nashville was full of ups and downs, as you don't get cut as a former first-round pick by accident. But there were certainly spans in Adarius' career where he played good, like most of the 2019 season for example. But over the last 2 years of Adarius' time in Tennessee, which includes 2019 by the way, the best ability in the NFL is, of course, availability. And granted, he played good in 2019, but between 19 and 20, he played in just 14 games, which was a red flag. And I don't think he ever lived up to the hype of being the number 18 overall draft pick, and this grade is a C-. 2017 was the year when the Commanders, the then Washington Redskins, started building their defensive line, and it started with Jonathan Allen. And in 6 years, he has 4 seasons with 6 or more sacks, which from the interior is very impressive, and he's played and started 85 games for the franchise. He is a 2-time Pro Bowler, and I think both him and teammate Deron Payne are an underrated duo and that they do not get talked about enough. Allen has 16 sacks over the last 2 years and is going on 5 straight seasons with 60 or more tackles from the defensive tackle position, which is very impressive. He is a force, and this draft grade is an A. And that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would mean the world and help the growth of the channel tremendously. My Twitter and Patreon links are in the description if you'd like to support the channel, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.